All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tisha Gropp. I'm the safety manager at Creek Carrier Corporation, and I am the current chair for the Safety Management Council for Nebraska Trucking Association. And I'd like to take a minute to thank everybody for joining us today. We've got some good information to give you and would like just to thank you for being here. Before we get started, I do have to address the disclaimer that's on your screen right now. The Nebraska Trucking Association presents this and other webinars for general information only. The views expressed by the speakers or third parties in NTA webinars, events, and/or conferences are those of the speaker or third party and not necessarily of NTA. Finally, on the disclaimer, the NTA webinars are private and open to NTA's members or specifically invited guests only. NTA webinars are not open to the public or news media. Anyone not a member of the NTA or who is a member of the news media must not remain connected to any NTA webinar. And now that we have that out of the way, we'll go ahead. I'm going to do a little bit of house cleaning first. This is a webinar, yes, but we would like for those involved to be involved. And if you would like to pose a question or have something you'd like to be heard, you can. There is a chat feature within this webinar, or you can email Dave Zelnio at dzelnio@nebtrucking.com, and those questions can be posed to the speakers. During today's webinar, you'll receive some valuable information on winter preparedness. We have Heath Richards from Hunt Transportation. He is their safety director. And we have Ben Rogers, who is the Senior Safety and Loss Representative from Great West Casualty Company. These two are going to discuss ways that our operations leaders can get their facilities, vehicles, and people ready for wet, slick, and dark conditions that occur during winter on winter roads. First, I'll introduce Heath. Heath has been a certified safety director for about 11 years. 5 of those years with Hunt Transportation. He has been the chairman of the Safety Management Council just before me, and 2018 Safety Director of the Year for the NTA. His drivers have received several safe driving awards during his career, and he currently holds his own CDL and drives commercially from time to time. Next, we're going to have Ben Rogers, and Ben is a 20-year Marine Corps veteran. Thank you for your service. In those 20 years in the Marines, he spent time in just about every department, but he is most proud of his 4 years in the embassy as embassy duty. After retiring from the Marines in 1994, Ben served as the safety director for Seward Motor Freight. He was there for about 12 years. After that, he and his family had the opportunity to move to Omaha, where he became a safety director for 9 years with Nationwide. And most recently, Ben's been with Great West Casualty Company for about 8 years as their loss control representative. These two are very knowledgeable in their fields, and I am very honored to pass the torch on to Heath, who will go ahead and start the presentation.
All right, thank you, Tisha. So let's go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully it's working. Can everybody see the PowerPoint presentation? All right, perfect. So again, thank you to the Safety Management Council for having me and Ben. And we're going to tag team this presentation. Last year we did the winter driving techniques and what causes accidents during winter driving. That has not changed. We all know, accidents caused because of speed, coefficient, friction, and reaction time. But what we thought we'd do is go through the numbers. How are the numbers looking over the last few years through the campaigns throughout the United States with safe driving? And then Ben is going to take it from there and kind of show you how your whole organization can reduce accidents and reduce loss. So without further ado, we'll get going. First slide, I love this slide. This is probably my favorite training slide. Distracted is distracted, period. And we know that in society today, when we hear the word distracted, automatically people think cell phones. Now, why that may be the case in some accidents, it's not in all of them. A distraction is a distraction. If the driver is not paying attention to his task at hand and has that circle of awareness, bad things are going to happen. And so let's look at the numbers. What do the numbers tell us? And if we look at some numbers here, this is traffic fatalities by person 2018, 2019. And I wanted to kind of show this one because if we look at the numbers for 2018, there were 36,835 deaths as a result of traffic collisions. And that's all. That's light cars, light trucks, motorcycles, large trucks, commercial motor vehicles, that's all. So 36,835. If we look at 2019, you'll see we're 36,096. If we put a calculator to it, it's a negative 739. So we actually, society went down 739 fatality accidents in 2019 from 2018, which is a 2% decrease. So we're doing great. We're reducing accidents, but we're not quite there yet. If you look down towards the middle of the screen, you'll see large trucks. 2018 went 890. 2019 there's 892. It's only a 0.2% increase, but it's going the wrong way. We don't ever want to increase. We always want to decrease. And so, and this comes right off the FARS report that I got off the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration website. If we kind of look at rural fatalities versus urban fatalities, depending on what your operation is, you may be urban all the time. Some carriers are both rural and urban, and some carriers are primarily rural. So if we look at the numbers, in 2018 versus 2019 in rural fatalities, they were up 17, 1% increase. But in urban, the high concentrated areas, we saw an 813 reduction, which is 4%. So that tells me that the urban areas are doing better. If you guys remember our safety summit in February last year, we talked about, actually it's February this year, I'm sorry. We talked where they're seeing speeding in rural and urban areas, but seatbelt use decrease in rural areas. So, that could play some factors there. The one that was surprising to me was fatalities in large truck crashes, a -1 from 2018 to 2019. So really not enough there to change the percentage, but it's going in the right direction. Intersections, we were ahead 32 in 2019 from 2018, which is 0.3%. And then roadway departures, to me that was the biggest one that stuck out to me was 18,632 versus 17,939 in 2019. So we reduced roadway departure fatalities as Americans by 693. Some could say that's due to training. Some could say that's due to more situational awareness. And technology has a lot to play with it. As cars and trucks are developed, a lot more better, safer technology like lane deviation devices, and lane departure. So it's alerting that driver, hey, you're departing the lane, and we can say that is working because we have reduced it by 3.7%. Now, as a nation as a whole, if we look at the whole map, if numbers aren't your thing like me, I like to look at pictures. I'm a picture person. Put up the map of the U.S., the 2019 traffic fatalities and percentage change from 2008. And I put that big black circle right there in the middle of the Midwest. If you look at that, Nebraska, 248, which is an increase of 7.8% from 2018. Iowa, many of you may know, I reside in the state of Iowa. Don't hold it against me. I was just brought there to better the state. I'm a true Oklahoman. But Iowa saw an increase of 5.3%. So while some of the nation's getting better. Here in the Midwest, we're actually getting worse, and that's not what we want. Not as a trucking association, but not as Nebraskans and Iowans. You know, we don't want to see this 7.8% increase or this 5.3% increase. So, you know, there's always that that famous question, why or how. A lot of us know how, a lot of us know why, but it's, are we doing what we need to do to correct those issues? And that'll segue into Ben. My next slide, going to here's a little snippet from a meeting between the NHTSA, the FMCSA, and then the Secretary of Transportation earlier this year. You know, they say that here we saw in 2019 fatalities that decreased by 2%, which is encouraging, you know, for a 3-year downward trend in deaths for traffic collisions, because that's our goal. Our goal is to get down to 0. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen next year. But as long as we continue to decrease these fatality accidents, we're going to get down there. But it takes a whole village. And that's what Ben's going to kind of explain it and give you guys a better perception of how the whole village plays a part in just the villagers. So if we look at the first 6 months of 2020, yeah, we've faced some unprecedented challenges this year, including traffic safety. But what they saw was they started seeing reckless driving, officers clocking driver's speed in the triple digits in many cases. If you follow the Nebraska State Patrol or the Iowa State Patrol on Facebook or social media, during the COVID period, they were catching a lot of drivers triple digits. Wasn't much traffic out on the road, so they figured, well, not a lot of traffic, I can go. That's not the case. And so, but they're saying their projections suggest that the total number of lives lost in traffic crashes in the second quarter of 2020 was down 3.3% over 2019. So again, we took what we learned in 2018, we trended down in 2019, and as of right now in 2020, we're still going the right way. We're going down. We're 302 fewer deaths than what we were this time last year. Now, some of you are saying, okay, let's just get to the truck numbers. Show us the truck numbers. We want to know what's the truck numbers. Well, if we look at the numbers from 2018, as you guys all know, numbers are always a year and a half behind. So it's not real live time, but this came out in September of 2020. If we look at 2018, fatal crashes involving large trucks or buses was 4,630. Large truck and bus involving fatal crashes was 5,096. Large truck and bus occupant fatalities, 928. And for the total in large truck and bus crashes, it was 5,184. Million vehicle miles traveled by all motor vehicles was 3.24, 327. Fatal trucks. So if we do the million mile, which we all know, it was a 0.14. So for every million miles traveled, 0.14 accident happened. What intrigued me is our numbers are going down in some cases, but if we look at trucking, you can look at 16, 17, and 18, the numbers are slowly creeping up. Now, that's not per se because we're not as organizations. The NHTSA, and I left this up there instead of cutting it out, was there's a little crosses next to the 16, 17, and 18. And what they did was the NHTSA, they implemented revised vehicle classification based on gross vehicle weight rating, which reclassified 329 light pickup trucks as large trucks. Now, most of us on this webinar would probably say, we drive Class A commercial trucks. There are some members of the association and probably some members on here that may not be members of the association that don't have over-the-road commercial trucks. They've got pickups, four-door crew cab diesels that pull a landscape trailer, or maybe they pull a vacuum trailer, but their truck is over 10,000 gross vehicle weight rating, so they fall into our category. Important, when you see the numbers increase, you know, they reclassified a large truck, so you know how much of that is in there, but it seems like we're adding about 1 million more large trucks and buses being registered every year, which is a lot. It will help the numbers, but if we look at fatality accidents with large trucks, we're still on a slight increase. Not where we want to be, but we'll get there. Like they said, you know, there's still more work to be done. In 2018, there were 4,415 fatal crashes involving large trucks with 885 truck occupants killed. So we lost 885 drivers or passengers in a commercial motor vehicle in 2018. In those fatal crashes, however, the majority of the fatalities were occupants of other vehicles. In 2018, 71% of those were killed. That's 3,525 people were occupants of the other vehicles, and 541 additional people were pedestrians, cyclists, and other road users. So seeing that, it goes all the way back to that very first slide. Distraction is distraction. And while we always say the driver is the captain of the ship, you'll see with Ben's presentation, he's going to show you that distraction even goes back on our stuff here in the office, whether it be operations, whether it be fleets, whether it be maintenance. You know, if we're distracted at our job, that could essentially hurt the driver. You know, if I'm a mechanic and my job is to ensure that truck is in safe operating order and that it is winter prepped, if I get distracted and start talking to my buddy about the Husker football game coming up, is it going to get canceled or not, and I miss a step, that could result in a fatal accident. It could result in a serious accident. So distraction is distracted regardless. We all need to do our part. And lastly, before I leave and turn it over to Ben, one of my favorite things to say is if you don't schedule time for training, your drivers will schedule it for you. And that goes with you can take drivers out and put all employees. You know, and so we brought Ben on. Ben is a valuable asset to the Trucking Association. He's going to go through his PowerPoint and give some examples. I will jump in. If you guys have any questions at any time, don't be afraid to raise your hand or chat them in. I'll be watching as Ben's talking, and I will jump in and I'll turn it over to Ben. So Ben, you're up, buddy.
Okay, thank you. Hard to follow you. No. But anyway, my name's Ben Rogers. I'm, again, a safety loss control specialist with Great West Casualty Insurance. And good afternoon. Thank you all, and thank the MTA and the Safety Management Council for having me today to kind of emphasize some safety points that you elaborated on. What Heath just talked about are the results of what we classify as accidents, but really accidents are not accidents. There's things you could do to minimize. Sometimes you can't always prevent them. But anyway, I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope everybody's doing well in this pandemic and everything going on. And also wanted to thank you on behalf of Great West Casualty and myself, you truckers, for you too are frontline workers, and you guys carried us through the pandemic's early stages with the shortfall in the supply chain for food. So from us to you, thank you. Now, to get on to elaborate on what Heath was talking about, I was asked to talk about safe winter operations. And before we do that, I also have to do a disclaimer. So the material and views, opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the Department of Transportation, Federal Motor Carriers, and the speaker, me. They do not reflect necessarily the views and opinions of Great West Casualty, and the material is intended for a broad overview of the subject matter and is provided for informational purposes. We do not provide legal or employment advice to our insureds, agents, or other parties. You should always sought out or seek out that from your legal counsel. Great West Company shall have neither liability nor responsibility to any person or entity in respect for any losses, action, or inaction alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of the information contained in this presentation. So, without further ado, let's see if I can do this without messing up. So, I already did it off the bat. So, keeping focused on winter hazards. This is what our drivers deal with when weather gets bad and can be treacherous, not only looking out for themselves, but for other people. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of several areas that we all are aware of, but may not effectively manage to mitigate this increased hazards during the wintertime. I was asked to talk to you a little bit about winter specifically because of those increased hazards and what you can do to minimize this risk of crash or injury. You notice I say crash, I don't say accident, because accidents aren't accidents. There's things that happen. You may not be able to avoid them, may not be your fault, but there could be contributing factors, things that you may be able to do to mitigate these things. And as operational folks, there's some things you can do to help your drivers out on the road and employees around the office. We tend to be more reactive, and safety personnel can really literally focus on this, that when something happens, we have to respond to it. But all too often, we're reactive and focused on the individual involved and not anything that might have contributed to that. That's what this slide of today is going to do. Let me give you an attention getter, an idea. Has anybody ever hit their finger with a hammer, nailing a nail and hit your finger? Or cut yourself cooking, cutting meat? You ever slipped on ice and fell? The question that I would propose to you is, did you do it on purpose? No, you didn't do it on purpose. It was an accident, right? Well, did everybody fall in that space? Does everybody cut their finger? Sometimes we do something like our attention is diverted a little bit, or we're talking and something happens. We can do things to mitigate those, and that's what this conversation is going to be about today. Specifically getting our owners involved, safety directors, operations, dispatchers, and the shop personnel to minimize that exposure. So let's look at a couple of things. For those of us at Great West that are Great West customers, this information is all available to you on our website and our blogs and other safety material. For those who have other insurers, ask your safety reps if you have one, or your agent, if they have information, if you're not already using it, to help you out, because we create stuff up front. Here's a good example of a safety talk that we put out every quarter that has information in it for hazards and things that are pre-done up for you. I'm sure other insurers have some of the same similar information, so take advantage of it if you have it. So let's look at some things that we can do. Make sure I got the right one here to start off. I'm a little fast on the trigger here. So there are four main types of loss exposures that motor carriers must address, and we don't tend to think about them, especially when winter increases the risk out on the road for crashes and workplace injuries. All of that increases. It's personnel, equipment, income, and liability. It can happen to all, can be affected by a single incident, or one or two, just depending on what it is. What management should do is lead the effort to communicate the dangers of winter, and let's look at some simple yet effective tips that'll help workers avoid crashes and injuries when the severe weather hits. Heath and I were talking when he asked me to do this, and he gave me a really good example. Heath, do you want to come in here and talk to me about last year when you had some trucks go up north?
Yeah, I will. You know, it's and this goes to, you know, for anybody. It doesn't matter how large the carrier, how many resources you have. It can happen to anybody. And last year, we got a call from a customer that asked if we could pull 6 loads out of Washington, but they needed them out fast. So of course, our customer service rep, yeah, we'll do that right away. So they dispatched 6 drivers that were kind of in the vicinity up there. And make a long story short, only one made it. The rest of them all got shut down by the weather. The one that did make it, he made it, but he was about 3 hours too late. They had already shut down the plant. And so we had 6 drivers stuck there in the Northwest for over 4 days. Now, they were all safe. They did make it to truck stops. But at the end of the day, that never should have happened. You know, when we looked at it, we had a couple management meetings on it. A, how did it happen? B, why did it happen? And C, most importantly, what can we do so it doesn't happen again? It never should have happened. And so one of the things that our folks got was a big 75-inch screen TV with the Weather Channel on it 24/7. But there were some things there that could have been done. It was an odd request. All of a sudden, you're typically calling customers asking for freight, but this customer called us and wanted trucks now. Well, what happened was they knew the storm was coming. We're trying to get the production out, and essentially what we did was we tried to abide and we didn't do our steps, and we stranded 6 drivers for over 4 days before we could get them moving. You know, that could have cost us quite a bit of things, and I won't take any of it under here, but he'll talk about those things that essentially cost us. Thankfully, nobody had an accident. You know, nobody got sick. Nothing major happened, but we lost some stuff, and I'll let Ben talk about those losses that most companies don't even look at.
Okay, thank you, Heath. So again, to get your focus on what we're trying to do here is that affected probably 3 of the 4 areas. When you do your cost of business, typically you don't allow funds for crashes, for losses. That's usually not in the statistics, but just what happened to Heath could have been easily avoided. You're going to get in those situations. You can't avoid 100%, but you can do stuff to mitigate. That affected personnel. They had drivers that were stranded that couldn't make it all the way to their destination, so they're stuck out on the road somewhere. It affected equipment. You weren't making any money on that equipment. You put the effort in to get there, but you didn't make it. So you lost income, right? Thank goodness you didn't have a crash. Remember last year they had 40 some odd trucks that piled up out there in Ohio somewhere? The point being is you can do something about that to mitigate those losses. So what do? Are you prepared? And again, the topic of what we're asking is ask yourself, am I being proactive or do I only react? Proactivity reduces the need for you to be reactive, right? So what can you do with these added exposures? Get everybody on the same page. It's not hard to do so that you can manage the increased risk of winter. Assess your training and awareness needs. Do you offer any refresher training when bad weather is coming out? How about for your less experienced drivers? Somebody that's never been in winter conditions before. Do they know how to react if something happens? Do you have a plan to mitigate your exposure when something happens? Good example is that out in Florida, right, the East Coast. They've got another hurricane coming that way, right? It's hurricane season. What do you hear on the news all the time? Warnings. They're telling people to prepare. What to do? You should evacuate, fill up your gas, board up. Where do they get that information? The news. What do our dispatchers do all day? They dispatch, right? They work on computers. After they get loads out, everybody's got ELDs, I'm assuming, or most of us do, that have some type of tracking facility on it where you can see where your vehicles are. Do you put your weather? Do you minimize that little weather screen out there and maybe pull it up and look at the map and see if there's any inclement weather coming up and maybe warn your drivers? Things you can do like that. Training and preparation for operations. Dispatch has more contact with the driver interaction than probably anybody else in the company consistently over time, right? Do they monitor the weather in bad conditions and load plan appropriately to hopefully avoid it if you can, or at least minimize it? Who makes the call when it's unsafe, when conditions are unsafe? What's your procedures? Do you guys have any procedures? If you don't, this is a good time to address that and maybe come up with some, right? Let's talk a little bit about injury prevention. These are not all inclusive. They are designed just to get you thinking about overall safety. We think of crashes all the time in the trucking industry, but injuries are kind of a secondary thing. Our work comp department gets on us safety reps all the time about, don't you ever talk about the work comp injury prevention? You know, we hear crashes all the time, and we have the value-driven driving, which is the 4 critical crashes that we promote, and we're always getting our carriers involved with that. But we also have value-driven life, which is injury prevention, as do most insurance companies. The injuries seem to get put off to the side until they happen also. So it's really good, especially in the wintertime, to think about injuries. Do you require your drivers to wear non-skid footwear? You know, if you've ever had a driver slip and fall at a customer or getting in and out of his vehicle or around your office, even the shop personnel. Do you train your drivers on 3 points of contact? 2 hands, 1 foot, 2 feet, 1 hand, getting in and out of that vehicle every time. I can't tell you how many times that we've heard a driver that his grasp slipped off the handlebar and he fell. That's what the 3-point contact does. Helps you prevent that type of stuff. Hopefully, they get in and out of their trucks the same way they get in. You get in like this, you don't jump out, right? You could land in a pothole, frozen, and break your ankle. That can easily be $100,000 worth of losses for you. Ensure your drivers do include a review of the handlebars and platform steps getting into the truck. Enforce that. That'll help minimize injuries to your drivers. Keep the walking surfaces around your facility clear with snow and ice. They can trip there also. Also, your employees can trip going in there. And instruct employees during these hazardous winter conditions, try to keep your hands free and out of your pocket, because if you go to slip and fall and your hands are in your pocket, you don't have anything to block yourself from falling. Think about it. You see people sometimes running with their hands in their pockets. So how about crashes? What can you do there? Are we practicing good practices? Are we relaying information to not only our drivers, but our employees? Remind drivers to use good decision-making skills and park if conditions warrant it. This is a real important area that safety directors, good safety directors, focus on their risk exposure. For us, things that I would do when I go visit a customer is I ask the safety department some questions like, do you have any probation or rejected drivers? Do you know what your SMS performance, roadside performance is? I might ask 1 or 2 questions about a loss. What am I doing? What I'm doing is gauging that individual's knowledge of his or her risk factor out on the road. If you can't answer any of those questions that I know the answer to, then I know you're not engaged in being proactive. What can that do for you? That can identify a driver that gets a lot of tickets. That can, or tailgates and gets cited for it or gets a roadside inspection. It can identify somebody that's had a lot of small losses, brings it to your attention so that you can do extra training with that individual to minimize that exposure. Encourage your drivers to get plenty of rest so fatigue doesn't become a factor. How can they do that? Well, with the ELD technology, you can see how long a driver's been driving. And you can be proactive as a dispatcher to prevent that fatigue factor. We all remember the winter months get shorter, the days are shorter, nights are longer, stress is increased because of the road conditions and other drivers out on the road that may not be practicing safe things. Another key thing, keep your mirrors, your windshield, and your lights clear of snow, ice, and mud. I know 2 minutes down the road, it's going to fog up again. But that doesn't prevent the fact that you should keep them clean. It helps somebody see you, helps you see, but it helps others see you also. Like your taillights, drivers tend to forget to do the trailers. The back of them are totally messed up. You can't see if you put on your brakes. Again, reminders to your drivers. Dispatch should help plan routes to avoid inclement weather. When you know something serious is coming, communicate that to your drivers. It's not hard to do. We all know, I've worked in a trucking company for many years. I know what happens. They get the loads out to the drivers, and if you don't have very many on your board, once you get everybody dispatched, what does the dispatcher do the rest of the day? They're sitting on their computer, maybe playing a card game, solitaire, whatever, right, until something happens. Take a little bit of time to open up the map, but see where your drivers are going, kind of do a little glance, keep it minimized there. So you're looking, you're aware, and maybe can get in front of some kind of hazard. Or if you see a driver that's been driving for a long, long time, that you might want to send a message or something to tell them to pull over and get a little rest. Just make sure they're okay. And that's with your route planning and all that kind of stuff. Maintenance plays a critical role and lots of times is overlooked. Again, I have firsthand experience, as do all you safety directors out there now that handle the safety. Little things like, I got a tire that's bald or balding, and the driver goes into the shop and says, hey, I need this tire replaced, but you're very, very busy. And you say, well, catch it next time you're in. Be aware of that, things that are dangers that increase the potential hazard of a crash, especially in winter months. Get it taken care of. We just had this happen with another insured, where they didn't do it, said we're going to do it next time. It was a steer tire that blew, and naturally it caused him to go sideways, and he hit another vehicle. So we have an expense here over somebody that didn't have time to change a tire that they had in the office, in the shop. If you can't do it, go down the road. Most trucking companies have a tire company that they use all the time. Get it replaced. Minimize the risk to your drivers out on the road. Instruct them to have wiper fluid and antifreeze available in the shop, and not just have it there, but whenever they see a driver, or post a sign in your shop or your driver's lounge, make sure you have extra antifreeze and wiper fluid. Put those reminders out there to your drivers, right? Another thing, decrease your speed, increase your following distance in bad weather. Good reminders to your drivers. Do your drivers know how to regain control if they get into a jackknife situation? If it's never happened to me and I do it, what's my reaction going to be? If I've never had it happen to me, your instinct is to what? Steer the opposite direction, hit your brakes. Those are the wrong things to do. Disengage the clutch, shift to neutral. If in an automatic, it should do that itself. But again, you steer toward the skid or counter steer to regain rolling traction, and then get back on where you're supposed to be. Things to talk about. There is videos available for this also, on either online or through your insurer. Again, the point that we're trying to make is talk about this stuff and remind your drivers. So other winter hazards, right? Operations, we just talked about, plays a support role in safety efforts. And how? Reminding their drivers to protect their equipment, themselves, and others when they're out on the road in adverse conditions. Critical crashes can be avoided with a little help. If the entire organization works together to help keep safety at the forefront of everybody's mind. How do you do that? Well, we've touched on it already. You plan ahead. You monitor weather reports. You communicate with your drivers. You help plan routes. Just think, your drivers out there, white knuckling it, with all the hazards out there, any help you can give them would be greatly appreciated and helpful. You never know. Again, reemphasize the fact that you want drivers to check their brakes, their tires, that their defroster is working and it's not cluttered up with stuff that's preventing the air from getting up there. I've seen a lot of trucks too, that your heater works. If you break down and you've not checked your heater, now what condition are you in? Little things, right? Ensure repairs are completed. We talked about that already before a driver leaves on a trip, right? Make sure your shop talk to them. Don't just leave them on autopilot. Have a little conversation with them that, hey, winter conditions, we're going to have a wiper fluid and antifreeze. Don't take shortcuts. If something comes in here, bald tires, for instance, we need to get them replaced. Don't turn a truck back out there with those conditions. That just adds to it. We've all slipped on ice, right? Do the best you can. Have you ever heard a dispatcher say, do the best you can? I know every single one of you have. What about the rest of that sentence? When a driver is talking to their dispatcher or driver manager and he hear the dispatcher say, well, do the best you can. What does the driver interpret that response? What does the driver hear? What do you think? I gotta go. And if I don't go, I may not get any good loads going forward. So that's what their mind hears. Finish that sentence with, do the best you can, but if you feel like you're stressing out, if the road conditions deteriorate, find a safe place to park and call so that we can address it and see what we're going to do to mitigate the circumstances. Simple as that. Finish that sentence with something like that. You've got the ability to monitor hours of service. It sounds like this is a lot of stuff, but it's not. Encourage drivers to take breaks to release the stress. Remind drivers to pack cold weather clothing. I can't stress that enough. I've had a good story with a driver of mine that he never wore a coat. Every year, I was there for 9 years. Every year, he was there a long time. He never wore a coat. And it's a short distance to run into the office. I get that. Just so happens that individual broke down that winter. And I got a phone call at 2 a.m. that he was broke down, needed help. And he was freezing because he couldn't turn the truck on. He told me he had his socks on his ears. Now picture that. The guy was about 5'6", but he weighed like 200 pounds and socks on his ears. I mean, I never could get that image out of my mind, and I never let him forget that. About take extra clothing, have extra water, extra food, and emergency supplies in the event you break down, because it does happen to us. Again, just a quick reminder to your drivers. When roads deteriorate, the driver should have the support of operations and be able to park if conditions are too hazardous to drive. It's a good practice. Make sure your drivers are aware of that they know that also. We also did best practices. We did this several years ago, and we came up with 7 essential driving techniques. These came from drivers, that this was the most response to each one of these categories. This was overwhelmingly the response that we got from drivers on how to best practices to avoid crashes. These are available to you. Every dispatcher should have this on their desk, just as little reminders. Avoid distractions, get plenty of sleep, avoid fatigue, put away your cell phone. We know that doesn't happen, but you should be preaching it, right? Wear polarized glasses because of the sun glare. It's increased driving into the sun. Be attentive to the road ahead. Watch for slowing traffic. Deer, potholes, other hazards, people stopping in front of you, people cutting you off. Maintain one lane. Avoid lane hopping. If you ever get a driver that gets a citation for erratic lane changes, you really should have a talk with them about that, because if they're doing it in the summer, they're doing it in the winter. And we all drive out there, we see things that happen. That increases your risk of a crash. That is aggressive driving behavior, and anytime you get anything like that, you should address it with that driver. But also remind them. Again, they can lead to a jackknife, lane change, or a crash with another vehicle. Maintain proper following distance. This is very important. We talk about a 6-second following distance. Every time I mention this, or most times I mention this, the driver says, if you tell me to slow down, I'm backing up if I slow down. Well, no, you're not backing up. You're going slower. But how does that help you? If you have something that happens in front of you, you have the time to react. If you are following this 6-second practice, 1001, 1002, 1003, and increase that in bad conditions. It just gives you a better opportunity to react if something happens in front of you. All too often in this, and you ask any of your drivers, when they pull up on somebody that's going too slow in front of them, we tend to sometimes wait too long before we decide to change lanes. And what do? We take a look at our mirror to see if the lane is open. What if it's not open? And we're going 65 miles per hour. Do you know how fast you're going in every second at 65 miles an hour? I use a visual. Everybody knows what a football field is. 100 yards, right? You go 1/3 the distance of a football field in 1 second at 65 miles an hour. So if you look for 1 second and you're closer than 95 feet, by the time you look back, if that vehicle isn't continuing to move forward, there is a likelihood you're going to rear end that vehicle. The point of this is do it farther away. Don't wait till the last second to make your lane change. Let's see here. Whoops, jumped too fast. Again, observe proper speed for conditions. Go 2 to 3 miles slower than the flow of traffic. Why do we say that? Because if somebody cuts you off, they will pull away from you. If you're going as fast as the other vehicles on the road and somebody dips in front of you, you're gaining speed. It increases your chances of a crash. It's a best practice to be a little bit slower and don't exceed the speed limit. Also teach reacting properly to hazards. Practice focusing on, and I do this myself, what if a deer jumped out in front of me right now? What would I do? There's no deer, but if it did, it forces me to kind of look to where I am at on the road and what would I do if that happened? If you do that, it's called practicing. You might react the proper way in the event something happens. We have had many times where a driver says something jumped out in front of them and they overreacted. Either went left, which is oncoming traffic, or overcorrected right and went off the road. We do 1 o'clock, right? We don't do this, but our instincts are going to, instinctively, we're going to do something to get out of the way. It's a habit, it's a reaction. Training and addressing plants it in the mind so that you hopefully will react properly if you are faced with that hazard and you don't panic and you operate correctly. Other key point, yield the right of way, slow down, allow others to merge. That's for pedestrians and other vehicles. If it's unclear who has the right of way, be courteous, allow them the right of way. Don't make U-turns in intersections. Go down the road, turn into a parking lot and turn around, or 3 rights to get back to where you're going. You never know who's behind you and you might not see them coming up on you. Again, think about what ifs. Remind your drivers and your dispatchers, driver managers, to play it safe and be courteous. For the dispatchers, the reminders on the road. Little things like this will help you out. So what can you do? Call to action for you guys. Again, it just kind of reiterates some of the things we've talked about already. Discuss the added exposures of winter weather with your dispatch and your drivers. Get everybody on the same page so that you can effectively manage the seasonal exposure and hopefully mitigate it. Assess your safety awareness needs. Do you have any training videos? That should be your next safety meeting. You should get drivers in and watch the video on tailgating, winter driving hazards, or go over some of those in the safety talks that we have. Provide some additional training if you need it. Train your driver managers or review with them to monitor weather conditions throughout the country. It may be nice and sunny where you are, but it could be a blizzard where one of your drivers are. Coordinate operations based on what you're seeing. Hold operations meetings, just like you get the weather alerts for the hurricane. If you know there's a blizzard coming and that's your operational area, have a quick meeting with your drivers, with your driver managers to kind of say what we're going to do with the weather forecast coming up. Do we have anybody in these areas? What can we do to help mitigate that or warn our drivers so that they're prepared? Decide who makes the call when weather conditions are unsafe. 911, if you ever call 911 or if you visit a 911 operator, they have a book If they get somebody took an overdose, they have a page that they can turn to of what you're supposed to do. If a child is not breathing, a baby, they have a page that they can open up and say, this is what you need to do. You could create something like that, a 1 or 2 pagers of how you want your people to operate during bad weather conditions and what's the protocols. Are your drivers ultimately able to make the call? If so, are they aware of it? Make sure they know so that they don't think they have to go, right? Remember, everybody plays a part in loss prevention. Sometimes that gets overlooked because we find the end game. If there's a crash, it's always the driver's fault. Why did you crash? What did you do? Sometimes there's mitigating circumstances that contribute to that. I tried to get my tire fixed. The shop was too busy. Said they'd do it next time. I got a steer tire blowout or I couldn't stop. So there's things that the dispatch said, do the best you can. Didn't tell me that I had to stop. When he says that, that means I got to go. Put something else on the end of that story. Management's role is to provide their employees with the knowledge and resources to do the job safely. You need to provide daily reminders, or when appropriate, to emphasize these points discussed and demonstrate your support for building a good safety culture within your companies. If you do these things, you'll never know if you've prevented a crash or an injury, because you never hear about them if they didn't happen generally. But you'd know if you never did anything to prevent one of these things from happening, like some additional training. I hope you all have a safe and profitable winter season. Thank you very much. And if there's any questions, feel free to shoot them at me, and I'll try to answer them for you.
And thank you, Ben, for going through that. And a lot of the things that we train drivers on, what Ben had kind of discussed and what we've discussed at previous lunch and learns, in all reality, you can honestly take that module and essentially train your operations staff, your fleet staff, your maintenance staff. Here, and I've seen it at other places where we try to eliminate excuses. Just give us the reason. For drivers, you can ask them 6 simple questions. Okay. 1, do you have a phone? Yes. Okay. B, do you have a weather app on that phone? Yep. Have you ever called somebody? Yep. You ever heard of satellite radio? Yeah. Do you have a CB radio? Yep. Have you ever watched the Weather Channel? Yep. Okay. So what I did there was I just took away 6 excuses of why you had a weather-related incident. Same way with the operations or the maintenance. If you take what you're training and preaching to the drivers and essentially do that inside your back office, you will see that your accidents, your incidents, your near misses will go down because everybody is on the same page. And so thinking about that, Ben, when you were talking about following distance, one that always was stuck in my head long before I became a safety director, and it was reinforced when I became a Smith system instructor, was I had a gentleman that kind of took me under the wing, and I was one at a younger age that I was always, what are they going so slow? Why are they going so slow? I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go. Well, he told me, it's real simple, you can't see what's going on, so that's why you're frustrated. So he made me hold a piece of paper right up to my nose. He says, what do you see? I says, well, nothing. He says, well, then take that piece of paper and hold it out there at arm's length. Now what do you see? I said, I can see this, I can see that. He goes, do you see why you get frustrated when you get that close? You can't see. And so it's always stuck with me. Ironically, about 5 years ago when I became a Smith system instructor, that instructor had used that. I'd always wondered, if they came from the same cloth or not, because I'd never heard it before. But just little things like that, we can all do our part. We focus a lot on the drivers, but I think we kind of also slack a little bit with our back office personnel. Matter of fact, this morning we had a phone call from a driver asking if we could verify what he was reading on the Colorado 511. Where he's at, the chain laws are in effect. He knows our stance that we don't run with chains. We prefer not to. He told us that, I see a chain law, I don't want to go. I'm going to wait it out here. I got plenty of provisions in my truck. Could you verify that it's still in effect? Took us less than 3 minutes. Yep, still in effect. Let's try back at noon, see what it does at noon. So if you practice it and you train everybody the same, they're all on the same page. And that driver there, I luckily don't have to worry about him trying to be a hero and get that load delivered on time, because he knows that it can be changed. The appointment time can be changed, and he wants to be safe, not only for himself, but for the motoring public. So everything you've done for us today, Ben. Hopefully everybody has taken something away from it. One thing that I'd like to do right now is thank US Bank for sponsoring this Lunch and Learn webinar. It's 2020. You never know what's going to come around the corner. These webinars are kind of new, but they've been proven valuable to the association members and members of the motoring public. And so we couldn't have these without great sponsors like US Bank. So again, a big thank you to US Bank for sponsoring this Lunch and Learn. I don't see any questions at right now. Dave, if you're mic'd up, I'll let you take it over. Otherwise, to everybody out there, we appreciate each and every one of you taking time out of your day to attend our webinar.
Yep. Thank you.